What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. We're talking about the free hit for Game Week 19, which I don't think many people thought we were going to be doing. I stupidly thought I could get really organised this week, maybe prep some videos ahead of time, have Christmas Day off, maybe even have Christmas Eve off as well, and then we get the extra free hit, and now, of course, Liverpool versus Leeds gets postponed, and suddenly it's all chaos. So the way I'm going to do this video, because I can't re-record it, it's going to have to stay live, whatever happens with postponements, is I'm going to talk about the key talking points, and I'm going to go through match by match so that if a match gets called off, you can just skip that section. So we're just going to talk about the players that I would be looking to target, and then we'll do the tinkering at the end. So if you do enjoy it, please do give it a like. Hit that subscribe button. If you want to check out my article from 888 Sport, there is a link in the description below. Otherwise, let's jump into it. Okay, so these are some of the key talking points that people wanted me to talk through. So just really quickly, because I know most of you know this, but I want to talk about how the free hit works, because a lot of people get confused about it, right? So one, if you use it, it's a bit like the wild card. If you use the free hit now, you can make unlimited changes right up until the deadline. The difference is that next week you'll get your team back from the previous week, right? You don't get to keep your team like you do on a wild card. It's for 1 week only. If you've got 2 free transfers and you use the free hit, you'll only ever have 1 free transfer afterwards. And you can't transfer a player in and then use the free hit and expect to have that player still in your side the week after. Once you use the free hit, it wipes any transfers you've done. Okay, that's the basics. So some of the key talking points, right, are what if there's more postponements after the deadline? Because let's not forget, we have had already, it doesn't always happen, most of the time you get them before, and you would hope with fans travelling over Christmas that they're going to give them a lot of notice, or at least 48 hours notice if it's going to happen. So I think if we can get through Christmas Eve with no more postponements, there'd have to be something major for any of the games to stop at that point. That might be wishful thinking, but that is just what I would consider. Like if we get to Boxing Day and on the 26th and the deadline passes, I'd be very surprised if any more games get postponed. But in some ways, using the free hit kind of almost covers you a little bit from that, because at least with the free hit, you can have a bench. Like most people are going to be in a situation where they've got probably at least 2 Liverpool players, right? Most people have got Salah and Trent, and a lot of people have kind of Jota as well, or a third Liverpool player. So that's already your bench kind of wiped out before you've got even Leeds players or Watford players, or maybe even some of you are still hanging on to Wolves players as well. So at least with the free hit, you can cover yourself with a bit of a bench, right? At what point is it necessary? There's not like a magic number. If you remember, right, last week was very similar. We only had 5 games on, which is even less than this week. And a lot of us were happy to go in with 9, 10, 11 players. The only real, as long as they're quality players, right? If you've got players like Brownhill or, I don't know, Basuma and players like that, they're not likely to get you many points. So I wouldn't even count them, really. Although appearance points are kind of key in game weeks like this. The difference this week is because everyone's just been given a free hit, like a lot of people are going to use it, so that kind of puts pressure on teams that aren't using it to kind of get up to 11 players. I think the issue is that even if you take like a hit or two, you're probably only, like I said, you're only getting to 11 players. You don't have a bench as well. So then you really are hoping that no other matches get called off. And also that there's no rotation. Because let's not forget, players have had like a week off, most of them. But there is another game like 2 or 3 days later. So players might get rested in this game to play in the next one, which we can't do. So that might be another reason for free hit. But for me, if you've got 11 players out that are mostly pretty good quality players with good fixtures this week, you cover most of the main players that a lot of people on free, like if you imagine people on free hit are going to be getting Kane, Son, Ronaldo and players like this. So if you've got maybe one of those as well, then you probably don't need to use the free hit. The problem is we don't 100% know exactly how all the other double game weeks and blank game weeks are going to fall. There will be some specific like big blanks and big doubles around game week 30, 35, 36 and times like that. But the Game Week 22 one isn't 100% confirmed. I've got this point later on, but we don't know where Liverpool and Leeds will go, right? There is some hope that Liverpool versus Leeds will go into Game Week 22. So those people that free hit and get their Liverpool players back, they will have a double, but that's not guaranteed. And so unless you use another free hit in Game Week 22, you've either got to go into that week with Liverpool players, which is fine, right? They got a pretty good fixture. I think it's Brentford. Or you've got to use transfers on them anyway. So there are some unknowns which might make it worthwhile not using the free hit this week and just using some transfers. Because obviously when the double game week does hit in 22, or hopefully does hit, a lot of us have got players now that have at least missed one game, which will hopefully go into that week. But it is very difficult to know 100% what's going to happen there. So is there a better time to use it? Yeah, possibly. There might be a better time. But for people that have got 2, I think you can be less worried about having to use it this week. But that comes on to my next point. What happens the week after? These teams that are calling games off already, right? Bearing in mind for Liverpool in particular, it wasn't because of them that the game got called off, right? It was because of Leeds. No blame game, but that is the case, right? So if the game's only like 2 days later, in fact, let me just quickly look it up on my other screen. So Leeds game, for example, would have been on the 26th because everyone apart from Man United is playing that day. Their next game's on the 28th. So is that game going to be on? Is there going to be more postponements? We just don't know. And are we then going to get to game week 20 and have to use another free hit? Do you know what I mean? I guess what I'm trying to say is, and there's nothing wrong with adapting to changes in FPL, but most of the reason it's being used this week is because we've got that extra one. If we didn't have that extra free hit, people would be using transfers to get their team out. They wouldn't be using that only free hit they had. So again, it's not a problem to do that because we have been given it. And there are going to be ways, especially if you've got, second wild card, at least one other free hit after this, you're going to be able to manage the rest of the season through transfer stuff. It's not, everyone always tries to make it out like it's going to be this really bad situation, but it won't be. There'll be ways to handle it. Like you could, if there's a blank game week in game week 30, you could dead end your team right up until that. So that basically means setting it up so that it's good before the blank and then also good for the blank game week. Obviously, there'll be less teams playing. And then afterwards, you wildcard back into whatever team you need for the rest of the season and stuff like that. The other thing you could do as well is if you use transfers this week to kind of bring in other players. So bearing in mind, people are going to be looking at Son, people are going to be looking at Kane, people are going to be looking at bringing in Ronaldo. These are all players that have missed games, so they will possibly have a double game week. So there is a chance you could even bench boost in game week 22 if you've got enough players, double game week players, right, and it goes ahead. And then you could look to wildcard and free hit after that. So there's loads of different ways. And I know with this stuff, people always want like a definitive answer of what is the best strategy. And if we had all the fixtures set up for the rest of the season, that would be great. But we don't. So we can only kind of speculate. I think if you want to play, I don't think there's a right or wrong. If you want to play the free hit this week, I don't think it's a bad move. But for some teams, you are going to be able to get around not having to play it. The biggest question is, do you sell Salah? And we shouldn't pretend otherwise. In game week 20, he is the best captain against Leicester. Leicester have not been great defensively. They played like Liverpool's B team, right? And they still conceded plenty of goals in the Carabao Cup. So we shouldn't pretend that he's not the best captain. But if you were to bring in Ronaldo this week, for example, then you've got Newcastle away. He's probably the best captain this week. Maybe Son or Kane, you could argue. But I think Ronaldo probably is the best captain this week. And then the week after, he's got Burnley at home. Now, again, Man United's turnaround is... Actually, they've got a bit more rest than everyone else. They don't play till Monday, and then they play again on Thursday. So they've still got a couple of days off, I guess. But they've had a longer rest period before that. So maybe Ronaldo would play both games, and captaining him against Burnley wouldn't be that bad either, but you would be going massively against everyone that's on Salah. So it is this big call. I think African Cup of Nations, from what it looks like, is going to go ahead. So Salah is going to go to African Cup of Nations. So even if Liverpool double in 22, he won't be available anyway. So again, whether or not we'd have to sell him is really going to depend. But he's a lot of money, right? So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. If you want to go Salah to Ronaldo, if you want to go Salah to Son and use a transfer and not use your free hit, absolutely fine. If you want to use it, that's probably fine too. I don't think there's too many cons to using it this week, really. If loads of matches get called off, everyone's screwed anyway. And yeah, you might be annoyed you've used the chip, but I just think if we get through to Boxing Day, the day that all those games are going to be played, I don't think they're suddenly all going to get called off. Not at this point. Too many fans travelling over Christmas. It just wouldn't look good. So let me know below, are you using the chip or are you going to avoid it? Obviously, the best thing to do is make a free hit team, but don't activate the button. Just wait for as long as possible, just in case something big changes. Okay, so I'm just going to fly through these matches and just go... This is basically a shortlist, but for every single match, so that if a match gets postponed, you can just skip it, right? I think Burnley versus Everton, I wouldn't completely discount Burnley options just because Everton have got so many injuries. I mean, if anything, this is one of the games that could get called off because Benitez was saying they had a load of players missing. I think they only had like 9 first-teamers or something like that. So Pope and Chris Wood could be good options. And from Everton, I would just avoid them, to be honest. I just think defensively they haven't looked great. I wouldn't want to go there. I just think there's better midfield options. And I only wrote Calvert-Lewin down because people keep asking me about him. There are kind of rumours going around and reports that he will be back for Boxing Day. The guy has been out for like 4 months, right? He's only played 3 games this season. That is it. Is he really going to get put in against Burnley and play 90 minutes? Maybe he is. Is that worth the risk when you're free hitting? I would say absolutely not. There's way better strikers you could go for this week. So I sometimes think we see kind of Leicester as like a difficult team. And look, we shouldn't I'm not saying that Leicester are the same as playing Norwich or Watford or something like that. But as I said, they have not been good defensively this season whatsoever. And we know how good Man City are that I wouldn't want to completely avoid them. There's not so many other good fixtures that I would avoid Man City this week. I think a defender like Cancelo would probably be one of the first names on the team sheet, to be honest. I think there's a good chance of a clean sheet here. And obviously we know how attacking he is as well. After that, it gets difficult. I'm not sure I would double up on the defence, although you could do if you wanted to. Edison and Diaz are probably the two that you would look at if you wanted to kind of cover more than just Cancelo on the clean sheet. Obviously, a lot of people are going to have Cancelo whether they free hit or not. So maybe the best way to get something out of the City defence is double up. But I don't think it's that exciting personally. Diaz isn't like massively attacking and Edison's kind of like a 6-point man really. And then in attack it gets really difficult because you've got to try and guess the Man City team sheet, right? And it makes it even harder because we know what players played last time. So you'd imagine it'd be different this time. Like Foden and Grealish would come back in. But you got all this disciplinary stuff. So I don't know how much I would risk it. But Foden is such a good price. If you've got a bench, it might be worth going for him. You could consider De Bruyne. I think the thing, if you go De Bruyne, I don't think it's necessarily a bad option. But obviously, they could just play Bernardo Silva and Gundogan. I would expect De Bruyne to play for what it's worth. But for such a lot of money, you want a bit more confidence, I think, than that. And also, he probably blocks you from getting one of Son, Kane or Ronaldo if you're trying to get all 3. So that's the only thing I would maybe worry about. But I see Man City scoring 2-3 goals in this, and they could definitely get a clean sheet. From Leicester, the only player I would consider is Vardy, but he just blocks too many other options. And I'm just like, Man City just away is the hardest fixture you're going to get. It's not to say Leicester can't score, and I'm sure Vardy could get a goal. But he's the only one I would consider, and even then, I probably wouldn't go for him. So unless you really want to kind of like tank your bench, right, which I basically mean put the cheapest players as possible that are going to play, the likes of Brandon Williams, I would completely avoid Norwich, right? I just don't think they're good enough whatsoever. Obviously, Pukki could be a long-term good bench option because he's cheap, but not for a free hit this week, right, which is what we're talking about. I mean, you've got to go for at least 2 Arsenal players. This probably is one of the best fixtures going this week if you take into account who's playing who. So I think you want to double up. I think in defence, Ramsdale's okay. I don't think Ramsdale's a bad option, to be honest, but there's loads of goalkeeper options this week. De Gea, Lloris, Edison, etc. So he's not necessarily a dead cert to go. And to be honest, I would rather double up on the attack than double up on the defence this week. I just think there's maybe because they're away, I just think maybe there's some better teams with better options. I don't think it's completely out of the question to double up. So you could go 2 of 3 of Ramsdale, Tierney, Gabriel. I think Tierney would definitely be in there for me. I think he's like probably the most attacking Arsenal defensive player. And then Lacazette probably should be on this list as an option. But again, I'm already thinking ahead to how I'm going to tinker. And I'm telling you now, Kane and Ronaldo would almost certainly be in my free hit team. So it makes it very difficult to fit in Lacazette as well. So I think Martinelli and Saka is where I would look. I think Saka is pretty much nailed on. I've said that quite a lot, right? He very rarely misses out. So I'd be very surprised if he misses this game. Martinelli didn't start the Carabao Cup game, and Smith Rowe and Odegaard did. So it looks almost certain that Martinelli will start again. And I do think out of all of them, he probably is the best option when they get... Like, if Saka and Martinelli get the same minutes, I would always back Martinelli over Saka. The thing that Saka has is he's absolutely nailed and probably isn't quite as injury-prone. But I think a double up on attack looks really good here. Martinelli and Saka, both really cheap as well. They not only enable other players, but they're also really good options themselves and have a good fixture. So for me, I'd probably go 1 defender, 2 attackers, but you could go the other way around if you wanted to. So Spurs versus Palace. This is an interesting one now because in the reverse fixture, Palace did really well, right? I think they won 3-0, didn't they? It was just a really bad game. I think it was Tanganga, got sent off. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. But I just think how Spurs played against Liverpool should give us some confidence. What I will say is, though, and I probably would go for Son and Kane if I could fit them in, because they're pretty much nailed. You know they're going to start. You know they're going to get 90 minutes. Obviously, Kane's on penalties as well. Is against Liverpool, They did play with a high line because that's how they play, right? And obviously Robertson and Trent were massively involved in the attack in that game. But it did give space in behind for Kane and Son to get into quite a few times. Palace are not going to let them do that. So if anything, I do wonder if Kane is, if you're going to go for one of these two, if Kane's the slightly better option in this kind of scenario. But ultimately, I think they're both good attacks. I think if you can get both, there's no real reason not to. Like, Palace, I think will have, let me just double check, but I think they've got Anderson back now. Yeah, he's fit and available. Did he play? He played 9 minutes in the last game. You'd expect him to play this game. So that might tighten Palace up a little bit. Like, we know earlier in the season, we did see them performing quite well defensively. I don't think they're necessarily going to get smashed like 4 or 5 goals. No way. But if Spurs do score, it's often Son and Kane that are involved. So I do think they're good picks. You could go for Dele Alli if you want to take a bit of a punt as someone a bit cheaper. And he did look good against Liverpool, but I feel like with Son and Kane, you know they're going to be on the team sheet. Everyone else in behind, you're just not quite sure. That was the formation that we expected Conte to play, like the 3-5-2. So you'd hope that Ali would play. But I think with a free hit, when you've got so many options, there really are so many games, so many good options. I don't know why you'd want to take too many risks, especially for players like Dele Alli, right? De Bruyne is a little bit different. You know what to expect from him. Dele Alli we're clinging on to kind of years ago. And I'm not saying he won't become a good option. I've definitely got my eye on him for longer term. But for the free hit, I don't think I would go there. In defence, again, like you've got Lloris if you want to cover the goalkeeper spot. Reguilon is probably the best defender. It would have been better if he played the last game, right? If he'd started. But I'm assuming that he's going to be fit enough to start this one. We'll have to wait and see what's said in press conferences and stuff like that. But Reguilon's the best defender, I would say. If you want to go a bit cheaper than Davies. For Crystal Palace, Gallagher and Zaha are the only ones I'd really consider. But again, Spurs away, probably not the week to go from if you're free hitting. So West Ham versus Southampton. West Ham did have a Carabao Cup game, so they're not fully rested, but obviously Antonio would be, okay? So the biggest problem with him is we don't know if he's definitely going to start, and I think if you're not free hitting, then possibly, I won't be selling him, that's for sure. I will be hoping that Moyes puts him in. He did say he was double jabbed, had shown no signs of symptoms. He just basically tested positive, so he wasn't able to play. But I just don't know about putting him on a free hit. I think Bowen, though, is a really good option. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't start. He's a really good price as well. And then so far in defence or Fabianski in defence, again, if you haven't got enough defenders from other teams like the Arsenals, Man United, Man City, Spurs, etc., then West Ham versus Southampton is probably a pretty good one. I do like Broja, though. I do think he's a bit of an enabler this week. He hasn't got the easiest game, but as a playing forward, and you'd hope he'd start again this week. He's only like, 5.1 million, I think. Let me just double check on the other screen. Yeah, he's 5.1. Adams is still currently flagged, lack of match fitness, and Armstrong is got a muscle injury, unknown return date. So you'd be very surprised if Broja doesn't start. So for 5.1 million, he could be a good enabler. Again, you probably don't want to play him, but to have a bench on a free hit, you've got to do it this week. I think if you're going into this week with possible postponements, rotation without a bench, it's a bit crazy. So Broja definitely on there, and they are the West Ham players I consider. I've got to be honest, right? I've written some names down here, but I don't think I would consider too many players from this match, right? I certainly wouldn't go for any Aston Villa players. They are at home. And again, I've said it a few times in the last couple of weeks. I do think Gerrard's improved them defensively, but when you're playing Chelsea, again, there's only 2 fixtures called off, so there's a lot of choice. So I just don't think you go for any Aston Villa players. Like Martinez maybe gets a bunch of saves, maybe Cash gets you an attack and return. I definitely wouldn't go Watkins. I'm not even sure why I've put him on the list, to be honest. And kind of similar for Chelsea, because Lukaku obviously was out with a negative test. Now positive test. Now he's tested negative. But he hasn't played for a few games, and then he already wasn't playing because of coming back from an injury and stuff like that. And they were integrating him back into the side very slowly. So it's a lot of money. It's a lot of a risk against a team that have improved defensively. Mount could be okay. I don't think there's any harm going for a defender. You could go for James or Alonso. You're probably going to go for Reece James because he was rested midweek, whereas Alonso wasn't. And obviously, a lot of people that aren't free hitting will have 1 or 2. Maybe even some people have still got 3 Chelsea defenders. So if you go completely without, you are backing against the crowd quite a lot. But I think when it comes to a defender, you've got to take the kind of more guaranteed clean sheet. So if I was going for someone from Chelsea, it'd probably be Reece James. but I don't know if I'd have too many more Chelsea players, to be honest, and I probably would have no Aston Villa. All right, we're getting to the end of the matches now. Then we're going to do the tinkering. So Brighton versus Brentford. I mean, I think it's a pretty good game for Brighton. We don't know if Tony is going to be back for sure. I think they want to give him minutes. So if he's fit enough to start, they will start him, and Mbomo as well. They're probably the only two to go for, but Brighton can be pretty good defensively. So again, with loads of other options, I'd probably avoid Brentford for the most part. Sanchez, again, I don't think he's a bad option in goal, but I think there's better goalkeeper options. Lamptey I really like because he's had a bit of a rest. He should start as long as he's fit and available, and he's only 4.5 million. So even if you don't have him in your first 11, I think he's a really good bench option this week as a defender. So I definitely look there. Obviously, you've got Dalot, Davies, Dyer as well as other options from other teams. And then Trossard and Morpay. Again, I think Brentford are... I think they're maybe a bit better defensively than we're now giving them credit for, but they are worse defensively than we gave them credit for right at the start of the season. They're probably somewhere more in the middle. So Trossard and Morpay could do well, but Brighton just never a team that you would expect to score too many goals. Like they score one, maybe score two. That's probably the lot for them. So this again is probably a match I would mostly avoid, apart from Lamptey, because I do think he's a good bench option. So again, Wilson's really the only one I would consider from Newcastle, but to be honest, I just wouldn't have him at all, not against Man United. Obviously, Man United have been off matches for some while now, but I'm pretty sure they've got most of the squad fit and available. Like most of them have been pictured training at this point. Rangnick seemed to say that a lot of them were fine, so you'd hope they'd be okay. Obviously, we saw how well Spurs did against Liverpool after they've been out for a while. We've got to remember that just because some of these players, and we don't necessarily know who, but have tested positive, it doesn't necessarily mean they had symptoms, right? They might have been able to train even if it was alone and stuff like that. And for some players, they've just been off because the match has been called off. So, okay, they've not had match practice, match fitness, but they have had a nice rest at a time when there's been a lot of matches. So this could be a really big game for Man United. Obviously, Ronaldo definitely would be in my side for Newcastle, where I don't see how he doesn't start this game. Scored 2 goals in the reverse fixture as well. Defensively, I think Dalot is first choice. But I don't know if I'm so confident this week, if you're free hitting, to go for him. Harry Maguire and David De Gea are probably a little bit more nailed on. I wouldn't, like, if someone had Dalot in the team, I wouldn't call him crazy. And again, I do think he's first choice. I do think he fits the way Rangnick wants to play way better, than the way Wan-Bissaka plays. But I guess because they've had a bit of time off, who knows? Who knows how that's going to fall? But yeah, Dalot's the most attacking. Telles as well. But again, Luke Shaw could play instead. So I wouldn't go over that. So I think if you want a defender, De Gea and Maguire are probably your sure bets. And if you want to take a bit of a punt, then it's probably on one of the midfielders. And it's probably got to be Sancho or Rashford. Again, we've only seen a couple of games under Rangnick, but we saw what the first 11 was at the time anyway, and that included Ronaldo, Fernandes, Sancho and Rashford. Again, Fernandes maybe should be on this list, but he's quite expensive. I think if you're going for unless you're going for 2 and you're going for a premium Man United player, it's got to be Ronaldo in my opinion, with the penalties as well. So Sancho and Rashford should start. Maybe at this point, Rangnick's trained with them. He's seen more in like Jesse Lingard, Martial and stuff like that. Greenwood as well, possibly could start. But that is, like, from what we know, they're not part of the first 11 unless things have changed. So for me, I'm going Ronaldo. I'm probably going Harry Maguire, but that's a little bit of bias for myself. And then I might, if I had space, go for one of Sancho or Rashford. I'd probably lean towards Rashford just because he was playing alongside Ronaldo as more of the striker in the couple of games that we did see. Okay, so on team selection yesterday, I kind of put together a kind of free hit that was just off the cuff. Right? I hadn't given it too much thought. And to be honest with you, so much stuff's been going on, right? It is Christmas as well. I'm trying to prepare for that. I've still not maybe completely nailed it in, like nailed a team. But I have given it a bit more thought, right? The players you see on screen right now, Cancelo, Martinelli, Son, Kane and Ronaldo, I would be pretty sure if I was free hitting, I would have one of them. Now, a lot of people are probably going to do that as well. And a lot of people who aren't free hitting are not going to have those 3 players, right? Absolutely not. Very few will. You could go, like I said earlier, you could go for someone like De Bruyne instead if you wanted to. You could go for, instead of the double up on Spurs, you could double up on Man United, go for Fernandes, Rashford, Sancho instead if you wanted to. But if I was free hitting right now, which I don't know where I stand with it, to be honest. I'm going to try and figure it out today, right? Without trying to figure it out on Christmas Day before. At least on Boxing Day, the deadline's now 1:30 instead of 11. So we've got a bit more time that day. But I think these 5 would definitely be in there. I think Saka has got there's a conversation to be had to have Saka ahead of Martinelli. This is probably what I would do. So I'm going to fill the rest in. I think in terms of playing keepers, as a bench keeper, Caballero Southampton is probably the cheapest. Guaita as well. It depends how much money you've got. If you've got the money, you could go for Ramsdale as your backup keeper, or you could even have him as your playing keeper. But I think you need to fill the spots. From the teams you want to target, you've got to fill the best spots, if that makes sense. So for me, for Arsenal, I think I would double up, and I probably would go for Saka. I just think Smith Rowe and Odegaard. I think Odegaard's just not attacking enough for an FPL point of view. I think he's good. He's played really well for Arsenal, but not attacking enough. You don't know if he's going to start. And I don't think you can say that Smith Rowe is definitely starting either, so I wouldn't go there personally. And then I'd probably have Tierney. And then for Spurs, so this is how I'll be thinking about it, right? For Spurs, for Arsenal, you could go Tierney or Ramsdale. If you just want one, right, you could double up. If you want one Spurs, it's Lloris or Reguilon for me. And I think Reguilon's the better option. So if you also want to cover Man United defence, then it's De Gea versus Maguire versus Dalot. And in that scenario, Maguire and Dalot probably don't give enough ahead of De Gea, where I'd probably just go for him. So if I'm playing a 3 at the back, then Tierney, Reguilon, Cancelo, or any of the Man United defenders better than those 3? I'm not sure they are. So unless I want to double up on one of their defences, and I've already doubled up on the Arsenal attack, doubled up on the Spurs attack as well, I've got to go for a different goalkeeper. And De Gea's quite cheap as well, 5.1. So that's probably where I would go. I'd also have Lamptey on the bench, I think. I don't see why he wouldn't play. He didn't. Yeah, he played 90 in the last game, but that was game week 17, right? They missed game week 18. So as long as he's available, he should be a pretty good option. And then it gets a little bit trickier. I'd probably play 5 in midfield. I'd have Broja as well, who I mentioned earlier, as a bench option. Obviously, if you put a bunch of players in that you're happy with that are a bit cheaper, then you can definitely beef up the forward line, right? If you wanted Lacazette or someone like that instead of Broja, fine. But I want to triple up on the other Arsenal players. I think for West Ham, it's too risky on a free hit to go for Antonio. Although if he's available and he starts, if he's fit, he could be brilliant. But I'm going to go for Bowen. And then it gets really hard, because I don't think I'd want to play 4 at the back this week. I'd probably go on the attack. And I want a Man City player. I just wonder if I would keep Foden in. I don't know. Mahrez, Grealish. Who's going to start? That is the problem. If Foden starts, we know how good he is, and he's such good value. I just can't fit De Bruyne in, really. So I think Foden is probably where I would go. And then I've got 5.6 million to get another playing defender in, so I'm just going to put Harry Maguire in. I'm not saying you have to go for him, but that's what I'm going to do. Could actually afford Laporte instead of Diaz and triple up on Man City that way. But you'd have to then choose to bench one of your good players. Obviously, you're playing Kane, you're playing Ronaldo, you're playing all 5 of these midfielders. And then I'm probably playing Tierney, Reguilon and Cancelo, because I think that's the most attacking way to go. And maybe have Laporte on the bench, but that could be Harry Maguire. So if I free hit, it'll probably be something like this. I'll tell you now, my plan will be to put together a free hit squad so that if I decide to use it on Boxing Day, and it's not going to be this big kind of suspense-filled deadline stream. I'm just not sure what I want to do, and I also don't want to spend Christmas Day thinking about it, but I will have a free hit team ready to go that if I need to push the button, I'm not stressing about it. I always do that for wildcards as well. If you're not quite sure, build the team and be ready to go, and also know what transfer you're going to make if you're not going to use the free hit. So something like that. I'm not saying definitely like that, but something like that. Let me know what you think. Are you using your free hit? Let me know in the comments below. There you go. That is it for this one. Hopefully it was useful, and hopefully it's set up in a way that even if another match is postponed, it's still useful. Obviously, if Man City or Man United or Arsenal is off, then it completely changes the free hit. I think we kind of need the Arsenal game to be on, because their attackers are such good enablers for the rest of the team. But I think if that was off and I had to put a bit more money in defence or midfield, I'd probably just take out one of Son or Kane and just go from there, because ultimately I'm probably going to captain Ronaldo this week anyway if I'm free hitting. So do give it a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button. I don't know if there's going to be a video tomorrow. Now, I did have plans to do it, but I've had to re-record team selection 3 times and change around what I'm doing today. So things have kind of got messed up. I'll try and get something out if I can, but if not, have a good Christmas if you're celebrating, and if you're not, have a good day whatever you're doing, and I will see you on Boxing Day 26th of December for the deadline stream. Thank you very much for watching. Hit that like button, hit subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.